Millionaire CEO watched an intern give her lunch away at work. He had no idea what she was hiding. When Daniel Mercer saw an intern give her lunch away at work for the third time that week, he stopped everything. She didn't laugh. She didn't explain. She just handed the bag over and went back to her desk like nothing happened. From the executive floor above, he couldn't look away. She never ate. Not once. No coffee, no snacks, no excuses. While everyone else complained about meetings and deadlines, she worked through lunch every single day. Daniel had seen a lot in his career. This didn't make sense. The intern's name was Emily Carter. Quiet, polite, always early, always invisible. She wasn't doing this for attention. She was doing it like it hurt. Like skipping meals was easier than saying the truth out loud. Daniel told himself to ignore it. He had companies to run and decisions that affected thousands of people. But the image followed him into meetings, into emails, into silence. Something about that lunch bag felt heavier than it should have been. If you believe in compassion and the quiet strength of ordinary people, take a moment to like and subscribe. Stories like this remind us how one small act can change everything. By the end of the week, he made a choice. He could pretend he hadn't seen anything. Or he could find out why a young intern was giving her food away and acting like it was normal. He chose to watch closer. From his glass office, the city looked distant and small. People moved like patterns on a screen, but Emily didn't fit any pattern he knew. And that scared him more than he wanted to admit. Because whatever she was hiding, it wasn't small, it wasn't simple, and it wasn't going to stay invisible for long. Daniel just didn't know yet that this small act of kindness would force him to face something from his own past. Daniel Mercer had built his reputation on control. At 46, he was the kind of CEO people described as sharp, distant, and always 5 steps ahead. He believed emotions belonged at home, not in boardrooms. His office reflected that belief perfectly. All glass, steel, and silence, sitting high above the city where nothing personal could reach him unless he allowed it. The company below him moved like a machine. Employees arrived on time, meetings ran long, and everyone followed the same rhythm day after day. Interns especially knew their place. They stayed quiet, kept their heads down, and tried not to be noticed. Emily Carter did all of that better than anyone else. She blended into the background so well that most people forgot she was even there. Emily was 22, working her first serious job while finishing night classes at a local college. She dressed simply, never wore anything flashy, and spoke only when spoken to. Her desk was always clean. Her work was always done early. She thanked people softly and never asked for favors. On paper, she was the kind of intern managers loved and rarely remembered. But Daniel remembered her now, not because of her performance reviews or her resume, but because of what she didn't do. She didn't eat. She didn't complain. She didn't join conversations in the break room. Day after day, while others unwrapped food and scrolled through their phones, Emily stayed seated, typing quietly, as if lunch simply didn't exist for her. At first, Daniel tried to rationalize it. Maybe she ate before work. Maybe she was on some strict diet. Maybe she just wasn't hungry. But explanations fell apart the more he watched. The paper bag always appeared. The exchange always happened. And Emily always walked away with nothing in her hands. What unsettled him most was how intentional it felt. Emily wasn't being careless or distracted. She chose to give that lunch away every time, even when no one was watching closely. It wasn't impulsive. It was practiced. That kind of consistency usually came from necessity, not generosity alone. Daniel began noticing details he had ignored before. The way Emily's hands shook slightly late in the afternoon. The way she lingered near the water fountain, drinking slowly, as if trying to fill an empty space. The way she smiled politely whenever someone mentioned food, then changed the subject without effort. Something about the situation created an unease Daniel wasn't used to feeling. He was accustomed to solving problems quickly, decisively. This one didn't come with numbers or reports. It came with silence. And silence, he was realizing, could hide far more than noise ever did. As the days passed, the question stopped being whether something was wrong. The real question became how long Emily had been carrying it alone, and why she was so determined to make sure no one noticed. That question stayed open, quietly pulling Daniel deeper into a story he hadn't planned to be part of. The moment that pushed everything forward didn't come with drama or raised voices. It came quietly, almost politely, the way life-changing moments often do. On a Thursday afternoon, Daniel approved a small internal memo that required all interns to attend a mandatory lunch briefing the following day. It was routine, nothing more than a corporate update, but it would force Emily into a situation she had been avoiding for weeks. Friday arrived with the usual rhythm, meetings stacked on top of meetings, phones ringing, keyboards clicking. At exactly noon, interns began moving toward the break room, some joking, others checking their phones. Daniel watched from above as the group gathered around the long table, food trays laid out neatly. Everyone showed up, everyone except Emily. Instead of heading toward the lunch, Emily stood near her desk, holding the familiar paper bag. Daniel felt a strange tightening in his chest as he watched her hesitate. She glanced at the break room once, then turned away and walked down the hall. A few seconds later, she handed the bag to a maintenance worker who looked genuinely surprised. Emily said something quietly, nodded once, and returned to her desk. That was the moment Daniel knew he could no longer pretend this was none of his business. This wasn't skipping lunch. This wasn't a habit. This was a choice she was making even when food was freely available to her, even when no one would have judged her for taking it, even when it made no sense to anyone watching. The maintenance worker walked away, holding the bag carefully, almost respectfully, as if it meant more than just a meal. Emily sat down and opened a spreadsheet, her posture straight, her expression neutral. If anyone else noticed what had just happened, they didn't show it. The office moved on. Daniel didn't. He canceled his next call without explanation. He didn't analyze a report or send an email. He stayed where he was, watching Emily through the glass, trying to understand what kind of person gives something away the moment it's offered to them. The kind of person who doesn't hesitate. The kind who seems prepared to go without. Daniel's instinct was to step in immediately, to call her to his office and demand an explanation. But something stopped him. He realized that forcing answers would only shut her down. Whatever Emily was dealing with, it was something she had chosen to keep hidden for a reason. If he wanted the truth, he would have to earn it. That afternoon, Daniel made a different decision. Instead of confronting her, he asked human resources for basic background information. Nothing invasive, nothing personal. He told himself it was professional curiosity. In reality, it was concern he didn't yet know how to name. And as he waited for that information, one thought kept returning to him. People don't give away what they need unless losing it feels less painful than keeping it. Emily had learned long before this job how to disappear in plain sight. That skill hadn't come from shyness, but from necessity. Growing up, she understood that asking questions invited attention, and attention often came with consequences she couldn't afford. So she learned to stay quiet, to smile politely, and to handle things on her own. That habit followed her into adulthood, and now into this office. By mid-afternoon, hunger settled in like a dull pressure behind her eyes. Emily drank water slowly, pacing herself, pretending the sensation would fade if she ignored it long enough. She focused on her screen, double-checking numbers she already knew were right, keeping her hands busy so she wouldn't think about food. The noise of the office helped. It distracted her from the one thing she refused to acknowledge. She knew people noticed things. They always did. But she trusted that no one would ask. In places like this, people were taught to mind their business, to stay in their lanes. That unspoken rule protected her more than sympathy ever could. Sympathy came with questions. Questions came with answers she wasn't ready to give. Emily's phone buzzed once in her pocket, and her stomach tightened even more. She didn't need to look to know who it was. Messages came every day around the same time, always short, always careful. Someone asking if she was okay. Someone reminding her why she couldn't afford to think about herself right now. She silenced the phone without reading the message and returned her attention to the screen. What no one at the office could see was how close she lived to the edge. Rent, tuition, transportation, and the quiet responsibility she carried outside these walls left very little room for mistakes. Food was the one thing she could control, the one expense she could cut without anyone else suffering. Giving her lunch away wasn't charity. It was strategy. As the afternoon dragged on, Emily felt the familiar wave of exhaustion that came from pushing herself too far for too long. Her body wanted rest. Her mind refused it. She told herself she just had to get through the day, then the week, then the month. Long-term thinking was dangerous. Survival lived in short windows. She packed up her things after most people had already left. moving slowly, carefully. The office lights dimmed automatically as she passed through the hall. She avoided her reflection in the glass walls, not because she didn't like what she saw, but because she didn't want to see how tired she looked. Tired invited concern. Concern invited attention. As Emily stepped out into the evening air, she felt both relief and dread. Relief that she had made it through another day unnoticed. Dread because tomorrow would require the same choices all over again. She had no idea that someone had been watching, not with judgment, but with a growing sense that her silence was hiding something fragile. And once seen, that kind of silence rarely stays untouched. Daniel didn't confront Emily right away. Instead, he changed the environment around her to see what would happen. Over the next week, he approved a quiet adjustment to the office routine that allowed interns flexible lunch hours and access to catered meals left over from executive meetings. It was framed as efficiency, nothing more. The kind of decision no one questioned. Daniel watched carefully to see if Emily would finally eat. She didn't. Even with food freely available, even with no eyes on her, Emily kept the same routine. She accepted the catered tray once, then carried it down the hall and handed it to a security guard working a double shift. Another day, she passed her portion to a delivery driver waiting in the lobby. Each time the exchange was quick and deliberate, as if she had rehearsed it. Daniel felt a quiet certainty settle in. This wasn't about access, it was about purpose. At the end of the week, Daniel asked his assistant to schedule a short check-in with Emily. No accusation, no urgency, just a conversation. When Emily stepped into his office, she looked composed but guarded, the way people do when they expect judgment. Daniel noticed how carefully she chose where to sit, how she kept her hands folded, how her eyes flicked briefly toward the glass walls before meeting his. He asked simple questions at first, how she was adjusting, whether her classes were going well. Emily answered politely, efficiently, without offering anything extra. When Daniel finally asked about lunch, her shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. She smiled, said she was fine, said she preferred to work through it. The words were smooth,